Find out how to go from entrepreneurial poverty to focused profitability with Michael Buzinski, the CEO of Buzzworthy Marketing, on today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Shepherd. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Gordon Shepherd. And to get started, I want to tell you how a few of the outstanding leaders who have already been on this show are making a huge impact. Like Andrea Linsky, director at Alberta EcoTrust, who on episode 27 told us about her passion to lead NBIX, the Emissions Neutral Building Information Exchange. Through this initiative, she is bringing a wide variety of industry partners together to get energy-efficient buildings built in Alberta, which will make the future brighter for all of us. Or how about Heather Fry, director at Truckers Against Trafficking? On episode 25, she talked about how TAT has educated more than 2 million people in the transportation industry to help in the fight against human trafficking. When you listen to this episode, you'll also hear about their Harriet Tubman Award, which is given to citizens who have actually helped to save lives. Both of these leaders and the work that they do are truly inspiring. So I hope you listen to their stories, as well as all of the other leaders on our past episodes. Another reason to check out the archive? Well, that's because the Executive Wins Podcast is the winner of the 2025 Best New Podcast Award in the Quill Podcasting Awards. It's an honor that I'm honestly very proud of. And another factor that I'm really proud of, the Executive Wins Podcast has surpassed more than 11,000 views on YouTube and more than 11,000 minutes of watch time. And that means that this show is having a huge impact. So check it out, get inspired, and grow your business. On today's episode, you'll learn how to go from entrepreneurial poverty to focused profitability with Michael Buzinski, CEO of Buzzworthy Marketing. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by our exclusive workshop called Wins and Losses: How Leaders Can Learn from Them and Grow Their Business. In this high-impact workshop, leadership teams learn how to reverse engineer past wins and losses using a proven 5-step system called the Anatomy of a Win to help them understand the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind past wins and losses. Once they master the system, then they can apply it to get more wins in the future and avoid future losses. During this session, leaders will also learn how to make a wins and losses list, as well as finding new ways to authentically celebrate with their teams. I'll be your instructor, bringing 25 plus years of experience and a proven system that you can learn to grow the overall results in your business. It's available in half-day, full-day, and customizable formats, and it's really good for team building and corporate retreats. So if you are a leader who wants to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business, then visit executivewins.com/workshops to learn more. And now on to today's show. We are lucky to be joined by Michael Buzz Buzinski, the CEO of Buzzworthy Marketing, a company that helps clients build profitable, viral marketing solutions that get real results. You can learn about their work at buzzworthy.biz. In this episode, you'll find out why Buzz made a major decision to evolve his business. Because while it was making money, it wasn't profitable. He calls it entrepreneurial poverty. And to get out of it, he did something remarkable. He made a major downsizing decision. And then he moved across the country and evolved his business into a more focused, more profitable entity. It's a conversation that every entrepreneur should pay close attention to, because it will help them learn when to let go and how to learn from past mistakes. I also want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created called the Anatomy of a Win, to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win that you hear on this show. I really do hope that you can use this approach to reach your next business milestone. And now here's Michael Buzinski with his executive win. Buzz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
Well, really, really good, and really, really lucky that you're here because we're going to hear about some lived entrepreneur experience that you might get the next guy to not sort of have to fall on his own sword based on, kind of watching what we're about to learn from you about some of, what you've been through. But there's a lot of people here on the show that maybe haven't met you just yet. So if you're at a party or some fun thing and you had to introduce yourself, what would you say?
They wouldn't need an introduction. They would already know. I'm just kidding. My name is Michael Buzinski. I fix random acts of marketing for B2B service-based firms.
I fix random acts of marketing. So, okay, what is a random act of marketing? Is it a good use of time or not a good use of time?
Usually random things in business are very bad. Anywhere, I don't care where what segment of business you're talking about.
you're taking the random out of random and you're putting something in there that's a lot better. And the marketing thing where a lot of dollars can get pretty flushed. I think, right? You're the one maybe that's going to help get those dollars go pound for pound and be better used in the work that you do at your Buzzworthy marketing scenario. Also, maybe just a bit about yourself, just while we're there, just sort of like family, that kind of thing, where you live, and that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah. I live in Virginia now. I have lived in 8 states over the last 51 years. I am a third generation Air Corps veteran, and I love to golf now. I live on a golf course. The first time I've ever done that. Never thought that would ever happen, but that's happening now, and that's an interesting thing. Love music. I'm a 15-year. I was a part-time professional musician for 15 years, from 13 to 28. So did that. I owned a recording studio. Is actually how I got started with my business after 10 years of being in the Air Force. Married, no kids, 2 fur babies.
All these different wonderful things that come together to make it up, and so unfair in a sense to get you to describe it all. The funny, the golf thing, my son's a golf instructor.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
The voice in my backswing. He works at Golf Tech here in Edmonton.
My instructor works at Golf Tech here in Richmond. That's funny.
Right? So my son's actually at Golf Tech, and so the voice in my backswing is my son's, and I never would have thought my 24-year-old kid would be the one that would be in my head for that.
But is it helping your handicap?
It made a huge difference. I mean, I'm like 2 pool noodles away from, getting the flight path on my swing to, right?
You're out on the course and you're like, why couldn't I get my club face closed? And you're like, oh, that's right. I got to pull back. Where's my noodle?
Well, when you're thinking about it too, it's funny with the Golf Tech experience because they put you on video. So you're like, no, my head wasn't moving. He's like, oh. Let's look at the evidence. Like, let me draw the line ago.
And shit. Yeah. No, I finally have my hips moving. I never had my hips. Everything was up with your body. So
random acts of golf is another podcast, I think, that we could get in there, how they're fixing our random acts of our swing. So there you go.
Random acts of golfing. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's it. So in the meantime, you've got, I always like to get in here. And so we know a little bit about you now. We know the core of your business is to get strategy into marketing and make it work in a structured way. What, in terms of your business, what would you describe as one of the biggest wins you've had over the years?
So I've been in business for 20 years now. And 7 years ago, the biggest win I had was deciding to close a 13,000 square foot creative marketing agency. Had dozens of employees, multi-million-dollar enterprise, a whole 9 yards. Problem was that I wasn't keeping enough of the money that we were bringing in, right? And so for 13 years, I lived in entrepreneurial poverty. And in 2018, I decided to make the choice to go a completely opposite direction. So I told everybody, you can still work for me, but we're just not doing it out of this building anymore, because I recognized that was the biggest anchor to my job satisfaction, to my profitability, all the things, right? And so reinvented how we did business. But over the last 7 years, I mean, that was the catalyst in my big win, which is now 7 years later. We are 7 times more profitable. I have time to go on multi-week vacations with my wife to great places all around the world. I can go visit my clients whenever I want. This weekend, I'm going to be going up to Chicago and seeing a baseball game at Wrigley Field for the first time, and spending a day before that golfing with my client. You know, I live in Virginia. We met when I lived in Illinois. And so just having that mobility and the freedom to be able to do that with clients and with my family and with my loved ones, that right there is the biggest win, right? There's so many other layers that build up to that win, but that's the biggest win.
You're talking this. There's a psychology to the moment that you described. My win was shutting that business in a
Mhm.
sense, or shutting that format of that business, and that's
Mhm.
hard to do because you
It's
were in it.
100% hard to do. It paid all the
You're in
bills
the
for
middle of all
13 years.
you know, you're on the beachhead or whatever, you're doing your thing and you're making it work and you're making it work, but you talked about, margin success.
Mhm.
What was your margin when you're in the middle of that 13 years, and what's your margin now percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, we were sitting at about 3% net, not including my salary, which was still not even 6 figures. So I still had a 5-figure salary.
So, right, and so but you were an entrepreneur and you had a
Yeah.
13,000 square foot space and you had an agency and you were bringing in millions of dollars of revenue. Isn't that insightful that the millions, the total amount of revenue doesn't mean anything at the end of the day if you can't sort of pull out some basic level of, sustainability, and you were able to, and probably enough, was it enough to keep you under the drip, or were you tired? Was there an incident? Like, what led to actually the closing for you?
It had to do with it was burnout. I mean, it was like I was having panic attacks and I was not happy, and I was just getting into a relationship that was she was smart enough. She had the emotional EQ to tell me this is not normal. Right. And I went into business in 2005, and that's like a dot-com era, right? The dot-com explosion and collapse, and everything around that time. If you started a business, it was all about your top line revenue, how many employees you had, and how big your facility was. Those were the three monikers to success. Today, 20 years later, most folks who are starting their business are looking at how much money am I going to keep? Net profit is more important. They don't care how many employees they have. They care how much time do they have to spend for themselves, their loved ones, family, and friends. Right? Those are
Remarkable.
two.
And yeah, and
Two.
you were able to dig out, because when you're in the middle
Yeah.
of that, and I've met, and actually I work as an executive coach and advisor, and I've been in the middle of the room with the two brothers with the 50-50 partnership that are burning
Mm.
$8 million a year to the ground,
Mhm.
don't know what their net profit is.
Jeez.
And supply chain issue, a boat gets stuck in a canal somewhere,
Ugh.
that suddenly they're out of business. Like, it's
Right.
literally that sort of razor's edge,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
just the complexity of that in terms of what it is. And so I've been in multiple different rooms where people don't get off the drip. They
Mhm.
don't have the self-awareness. They don't have a loved one like you had to say, "Hey, here's a mirror.
Yeah.
Take a look," right? And
Yeah.
get that kind of figured out. So I'm glad you got that win. Congratulations. And we hear all the good stuff that came from it. So what a nice time for you to be in from your lived experience. When I look at wins, I always like to break down the win with what I call the anatomy of a win, where we look at the strategy, the work plan, people, operations, and results
Right.
behind the win. So
Right.
there's a moment where strategically there's something about values, vision, mission,
Mhm.
goals, where you're
Mhm.
in the middle of that 13 years or somewhere in there, where there's strategically, you've got to make a shift in
Mhm.
there. So how would
Mhm.
you describe the strategy highlight that got you to the win?
So it's crazy because culture was my biggest strategy of keeping. So we were in Anchorage, Alaska. Okay. And there's only so much talent up there. And I was the new kid on the block when I started my firm. Okay. And it's fun. So I had to do a lot of uh, recruiting from what we call the lower 48. So the contiguous United States. Let me say that 10 times real fast. Okay. So with that, 50% of those kids are out of college, right out of college, right? Because most folks weren't able to say, oh, okay, you are a small firm, boutique firm at that point, right? We only had a couple dozen employees. And so where I had to hire them young. 50% of them couldn't handle one winter, right? So it had to be culture. And so I had people who absolutely, I mean, they came from like Florida and South Carolina, and it's like, what's this snow thing, right? And they see the snow for the first time. I had employees who would come into my office, and the only reason I'm staying here is because of BuzzBiz Creative. That's what the name of that creative agency was. And so when that right there wasn't able to sustain because I didn't have the right people on the bus, I couldn't get the middle management. The strategy fell apart when middle management had to get more robust. But because I was running on such razor thin margins, I couldn't afford to bring on the generals, the colonels, and the people to run that. I had maybe one or two that were in the department level. That's great, but I didn't have like a number 2 and a number 3 to run overall operations and finance and those types of things. And so eventually that became such a stress point for me, because now I'm spinning those plates. I'm trying to figure out how to get profitable. And when I looked at strategy and going, okay, how do I dig myself out of this hole? Right? Because it really was a hole. And I basically said, it's going to take me 5 years to dig myself out of this hole. And I says, well, is it a good strategy to sit there and be miserable for another 5 years? I mean, you already did for 13, and be in my mid 40s by then, right? No, my late 40s, almost 50 by then. Or do I burn it to the ground, find the phoenix, and rise from the ashes? And I didn't have a strategy on when I decided that. I did not have a strategy. The only strategy was get out of this damn building. And I went from 13,000 square feet to 1,300 square feet. I went from 24, 26 people in the building to one person in the building. Everybody else worked remotely. And less than a year later, and we had 300 clients that I had to then dwindle down to 15. It took over a year to get down to that. 15 that I actually wanted to hold on to, right? So we went into all of that. But it was strategy on the go, right? And for the last 7 years, it has been continuingly be strategy on the go, because now you have a rebrand. Okay, now you have to restructure. Now I'm working remotely versus brick and mortar. Now I have to build a culture on people I have never met in person that have worked with me for years, right? All of these things are there. And right now, as the recording of this interview, we are less than 10 weeks away from the second rebrand in the last 7 years, and renaming the company from Buzzworthy Marketing down to Buzzworthy Strategies. And I'm getting rid of the last remnants of the creative agency that I've been trying to shake for 7 years.
And you understand the margin betterness of strategies versus marketing. You've lived the marketing thing. What a tough time for marketers through the stretch that you talked about, especially that agency format. I remember being in a meeting just maybe say about 10 years ago, and someone who had hung on from the 90s in their marketing agency was in a meeting with a startup. And they were going to charge the startup $30,000 for a logo. And I remember watching that happen. I was like, wow, you've got 90s numbers in your head when money just wasn't an issue for people. And you're about to give zero value to someone who has a need for a logo in 5 years. They don't need a logo right now. They need some customers coming in the door. That's all they need. But it was shocking to me, the misalignment that occurred there. And you were on that you spun up the machine, you had all the people, you had all that thing going, but in the meantime, but you recognized it. And good for you, because again, I think so many people simply go down with that burning ship rather than make that change. So we heard that the strategy was really reactive in a sense, because you knew you needed to make a change, but you made there's something strong about the leadership decision in that moment, because you've been bumping along a certain way for more than a decade, but something in you was able to get that leadership gumption, and then to wind down those clients, go through those 250 plus conversations with all those people, right, that you had on board, but they weren't aligned with, but then you got down to the right 15 and got this into a purpose-driven scenario, which now is getting even better 10 weeks from now as you get to that strategy thing, which is probably where you might have been from the first place, but that's your learning curve, and good on you. You kind of lived it and you got as far as you went.
Tigers it's very hard to change the tiger stripes, right? And you know what works. And as an entrepreneur, we take risks, but we take calculated risks, and we always ground our risk with something that we're a little from one piece of it. It's got to be something familiar, right? It's very foolish to just jump into something that you have no grounding in, right? And you can make big risks and little risks, but at least you have a toe on some of the water that you've been in before, right? Type of thing. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that it comes down to always learning. I've probably read over 300 books in the last 7 years, and I don't read fiction. So every book that I read is more knowledge. Now, knowledge is worthless without wisdom, because wisdom is knowledge and experience, right? And so these last 7 years have, I've reworked my org chart and my strategy at least 5 times. Like every year it gets tweaked, right? This one is a year and a half in the making of like, okay, if we're going to go down this road, we got to take our own advice and get everything aligned. So our message has to align with what we want. Otherwise we're not going to get what we need. And so I'm like, you know what? This is not a big departure. And it actually is a retrograde of our branding to when we went from biz to Buzzworthy. And we're blending a little bit of the new that we had 4 years ago when we did it was a brand update. We didn't change our name or anything like that. We just simplified it, made it more modern, ... But now we're coming back because the old logo actually had the structure that I was looking for originally. And so sometimes you lose your way because the way is always getting clouded, foggy times, like when iOS 14 changed digital marketing forever. AI comes on the market and you have people now thinking that Grok understands you better than your marketing consultant does. And all of the things that are disrupting the marketing industry over the last 20 years has been amazing. I went through the great recession of 2008. I was only like 3 years old. It was like, well, how are we going to get through this, right? But I think that's that grit and stick-to-itiveness that get people to the 20-year mark. And I remember when I was just starting out, I'm like seeing some of my vendors with their 20 years established, in what was that, 1985, right? And I'm like, wow, 85, I was in grade school, and it was like, I hope I can be one of those guys and put the 20-year mark on there. And this funny thing is this, I'm in 20-year mark right now, right? I haven't put anything like that in any of my branding because I feel like the business gets reinvented every day you come to work.
And that's the nature of the marketing and the area that you're practicing in, right? Yeah. That is just the disruptions. It's just madness right now. And it's funny, I'm on the business advisor side. People are talking to ChatGPT. Oh yeah, no, I put my personality profiles in there and now it answers me. And I'm like, wow. Like when I think about craft and the practice and the MBA and whatever I back up my sort of world with, and what it's taken to think now, the perception would be that would be way better. And I'll argue myself up against that. But maybe it's going to be like Big Blue that beat the chess players. We beat them one year and then Blue just gets better and better. Who knows? We'll see how that goes. But well,
I'll tell you right now. What I told, we used to, you were you and I are not too far off in generational. We're in the same generation. We used to hear that knowledge is power, right? So we get our MBAs, we do all the things, right? Well, knowledge is now commoditized. Okay. You can get any knowledge you want. Now, what's most important is wisdom. And wisdom is, like I said just a minute ago, where knowledge meets experience. And it's the experience and the wisdom that creates that wisdom that people are going to pay for now. It's your
and people haven't lived a 13-year business and burnt it to the ground and reinvented the leadership. Do you know what I mean? Like when I look into your bundle and how any leader would benefit from that, because it doesn't matter what scale the business is, you'd be able to bring that lived experience to the given situation that you're in. Sorry, I just need to pick on you for just a second. This will be an unfair question. Favorite quote from a book, and make it really concise. Like, do you have a favorite sort of saying or quote from one of those books that you've read?
Zig Ziglar says, if you get enough people what they want, you will always have everything you need. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's
perfect. Really I'll let that sit there. We talked about the strategy. there's a work plan of sorts that we described, a timeline. There's a moment where you're in there, you're like, I'm going to turn to get in my mid 40s. I've got to kind of make this work. You've described the timeline as we've gone along here. That process from sort of, I've got to get out of here to now, how
Mhm.
long did that, when was the spark of the idea and how long did it take?
7 years. I mean, it was from the day that I sat in the foyer of this place that I had just built 2 years prior. We had gone from a 3,500 square foot facility to a 13,000 square foot facility just 2 years prior. Spent over $250,000 retrofitting it to us. And it's so iterative. I think that so many people think, and when I was younger, I thought this, like, you plan it out, right? And you create the linear, and you plan for, well, the bumps and roads, and knowing that you're going to have to be agile, but like you plan out 10 years. And somebody says, where were you going to be in 10 years? I was like, I'll probably be some type of retired in 15. But I have no idea what that's going to look like because I'm an entrepreneur. I was just talking to for another entrepreneur friend of mine yesterday, and it's like, you're talking about retirement. I was like, we're entrepreneurs. We never retire. Like, we're always creating. Now, are we going to be in the office every day? No. Our idea of retiring versus my parents' idea of retiring, where it's like, hey, I don't have to go to work anymore, and they're proud of it. And I'm listening going, I don't want to be, I mean, in 15 years, I'll be 65, 66, something like that. And like, I don't want to be sitting at home not doing anything. I don't want the only thing that is a part of my day that I feel is or that I've accomplished is that I got through another 18 holes of golf and I got a little bit better. Like, that is a byproduct that I have the time to do that, but I'm always going to be creating. I'm always going to be writing. I'm always going to be learning, because when you stop doing that, you start dying inside.
I'm right with you. It's funny. My wife and I are in the same mindset. Like, we've had this conversation of like, because there's a friend of mine who's good at retirement, and he's 50. He's my age, 58 years old, and he's been retired for like 3 or 4 years now.
Mm.
And I'm listening. He's like, yeah, I golfed 80 rounds last year in the summer, and I did, I curl and I do this, and I'm like, it's not for me. And I had a guy hire me one time, a guy who was retiring as a lawyer, because he went over to his buddy's house. And his buddy's multimillionaire, have more money, can't spend it in 10 lifetimes. And it was a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. His buddy answers the door in a robe, hasn't gotten dressed yet. He says, come on in, I'm watching The Green Mile. He goes, and this guy says, well, haven't you seen that movie before? He goes, oh yeah, like 10 times, but it's really good. And I'm like, he was like, at that moment, he knew that he didn't want to watch The Green Mile for the 11th time. So he started to work on this very conversation. And when I admire people, like Jimmy Pattison in Canada, who started a car dealership and now probably has, I don't know, 80 lines of business that report to him, and he's in his mid 90s still going. And it's not that, again, like you said, if retirement and the other typical retirement that you've described is good for you, that's great. And if you can do it well, I think that's good, and you're happy, perfect. But I am right with you in terms of certainly being stimulated for all the different things that you can do and give back, and especially when you got those peak skills, like the post 60 peak skills, that 60 to 75 zone is peak skills. So how can you get an hour of somebody's time, to kind of do it? Oh, what a great conversation in terms of getting to range into that. But I'll come back to the anatomy of win to say the strategy was, this place is on fire. We better get out of here and make this change. We got a work plan that took 7 years. And we can hear some of those things along the way. There's people involved whenever we get a win. And so how would you describe your attitude in that first moment, and then attitude prior, and then attitude during, and attitude after getting the win?
So I joked with my my girlfriend at the time back in the day, and I said, "Can I just hire Gen Xers or people who are over 35?" And she says, "You can't do that." And I says, "I really wish I could." I'm tired of babysitting young adults. That was my mindset. Okay. I just hired a 28-year-old operations manager. Okay. Let that sink in. Now, I hired her because of a culture fit, not her skill fit. She had skills. She didn't have as much experience as some of the people, the top three. There were two that were highly skilled, right? One of them that was highly skilled and had the culture fit, but then she got a job before I could go through my process, because I now hire very slow and fire fast. Before, I would hire very fast and fire very slow, like like unprofitably slow, because for various reasons. So now the struggle is the gap between Gen Z and Gen X, right? Because what they think is acceptable and what I think are acceptable are different. And I have to bridge the gap and educate them so that they can meet up to the skill set, right? Which comes with a little bit of shift in mindset. But I hired her because she had enough to get the job done, enough skills to get the job done, but she was a perfect culture fit. She got excited about the culture we were building, where we were going, what our purpose was, what my vision was, and all that stuff. So she started talking about the fact that I needed somebody that was going to be able to take all the operations off, eventually take all operations off my plate so that I can be open to create, open to do vision work, open to network and do the things that CEOs and founders do really well, right? I can create frameworks, I can create systems, I can do those. I suck at keeping them going. She's a system person. So she's like, yes, you give me the system, but I know that I'm going to build, she's getting her master's degree in a couple of different things, very, very smart person. And one of the things we're going to upskill her with is the ability to build the systems off of my strategies. So no longer will I need to do a strategy and then build the system. I will show the strategy. We will discuss elements of the system and the flow, and then they will take over and make that system work.
So there's a moment where you wanted to hire everybody just like you with the same work ethic and the same approach.
Right.
And then that has evolved since then.
Oh, yeah.
So that you've been able to adapt the realities of different ages in the workforce. And culture is a through line here, though.
Oh, yeah.
You know that if culture and vision is shared, and what a wise thing to say, in terms of, as you're scaling your business going forward. That's great. So we learned about the win, we learned about the strategy, the work plan, we learned a little bit about the people. Operationally, when we get a win, in this case, shut the doors, there's an operational component to say, well, we got to wind down these clients. We've got to do that. But there was also a through line. If we think about it like an hourglass of sorts, so you got to wind it all down, but then you have to spin it up again in a different way. What operational highlights would you describe for getting this win?
So originally, the strategy was, once I found out that I had one taker out of over 25 employees on the remote working, and they lasted all of 2 months. Because the generation just needed the water cooler. They needed that face-to-face time. It was not 2025 yet. COVID had not taught us another way of, living our lives, right? And now you have people who get out of college and are like, I ain't sitting in a cubicle. You're not going to catch me dead in that, right? And so I quickly had to figure out how to expand my subcontractor core. And so that operationally is a big deal, right? And account management and project management are the two biggest things that we've had to work through for 7 years. And I finally, I'm a stubborn SOB. So, it only took 7 years to figure out, what? If we had less things we did, we would need less project management. And so really it's like, we followed our own advice as far as the single point of entry for all clients, but then I didn't learn the lesson of like, yes, you can have the expansion of offerings once they're in, but should you, right? And how can you keep the expansion within the confines of a core competency? Like everybody's good at a bunch of stuff, but core competencies they don't move very often. And so being honest with ourselves and saying, really, 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 what are you good at? And getting in there and say, you know what? Strategy. You take complex things and you synthesize them, you simplify them, and you systemize them. So all services should be around synthesizing, simplifying, and systemizing. In marketing for a very specific type of business at a very specific stage of that type of business's lifestyle. People
And
talk
that
about
takes forever. Like, you're being very eloquent. That's a lot of, you know what I mean? That's the
you know,
Mike Tyson.
that's a lot of
Everybody
that's a lot of trial and error.
try,
Like,
right? Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a
it's a
plan
lot of
till they
trial
get
and
punched in the
error.
face, right? Like, it's that very thing. And then how nice to get it boiled down. How
Yeah.
nice that you actually have pulled that together to then put your operations to right size your operations in a sense.
Right.
Because the temptation, and you can hear it if we dug into that 300 client list,
Mm.
the bottom 100 were not in your core competencies. They were bringing money in the door. You know what I mean? But they
They were
weren't
cash
good.
flow. Like, I
They were
know,
cash flow.
I would say not even the bottom 100. The only 15 of those clients out of 300 were actually profitable clients that aligned with where I wanted to go with what I wanted to provide. Right. I went from like, yeah, we can do that, which is agency. That's how creative agencies work. Yeah, we can get that. We can figure that out because that's what agencies do. We figure things out. Right. And I liked problems. New problems were always my favorite. And so it was ever expanding and never established. Right. And so as you know, it takes time in the B2B space to understand the cycles, the patterns of cycles, because cycles are longer in the B2B world. Your sales cycles are longer. That means that their sales cycles are longer, which means their results take longer to find. So you can have a great idea and you can try it out on 2 or 3 people, but you're still not going to get some of the actual numbers you really need for another year to 2 years. So you have to be very strategic on the strategies you decide to test.
There's a guy I've been having coffee with for 10 years. We went for coffee recently.
Uh-huh.
He got it. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. And within a week, I had 2 referrals.
There you go.
But that's a B2B scenario of like, who are, what, oh, and then fit and finding that way. How lucky for you, your team, the clients that you have, that you've gotten it down to this laser focus, because now you know that the results that you're bringing are higher. They're just better. You can hear it. Strategy, work plan, people, operations, results. Quantitative and qualitative results. We've heard some of them. Qualitatively, you're going on cool trips. Like you're doing that, you know, you freed up some time, you're golfing, you know, you're doing that kind of stuff.
The resting heart rate is below 60 again.
Right. Yeah, right. You've actually, the panic attacks, I actually know another entrepreneur, same thing. He had to make the change when he was in the emergency bed because of the panic attack. And that was his moment. I mean, that's a real story. It's just unbelievable in terms of how far we can push.
I remember going to the doc going, I think my heart's not doing what it is. He said you get heart palpitations. I was like, what? What is that?
and all given to yourself. What a gift. It took you 13 years to give yourself the palpitations.
I said back in the day, I'm like, I don't own a business. I own a job. And my boss is a jerk.
I better talk to my boss. That is so good. Oh man. So in the results, what's the 1 or 2 that you like to kind of point out for people from this win?
So it's funny, for the last, I'd say 3 years, we've been hovering between 25 and 30 reoccurring clients. We service about 100 companies a year, but reoccurring revenue is like the biggest thing, right? And I base everything off of that. And a book I read really early in this transition was called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And that changed my whole world. When I got my degree in small business management and entrepreneurship, I got a C in corporate finance because it absolutely made no sense to me. I'm like, no, money in, money out. How much do you keep, right? And then Profit First came where it says money in, you keep money, and then the rest of it you can spend on operations. And I was like, okay, I like this. I understand this. And it's actually permeated into my personal finances, how I budget things now. Like I need this for this, and then the rest of it we can work on. That's what we live off of, right? So with that said, we are 7 times more profitable, meaning that the taxes, with taxes, because you got to pay your taxes and the whole 9 yards, we are 21%. Is that right? Yep. Just around 21% net profit versus 3. Now, if you add my salary back in there, which is in the 6 figures, we're talking closer to 36% profitability.
Congratulations. I mean,
So
that's
12 times
incredible,
more
right? It's a long story to get to this moment in time.
Yeah.
You've been really eloquent about, you know, hitting the high points along the way, but the sleepless nights and the heart palpitations and the what it takes, and then the joy that you have on these trips, your appreciation of these trips, that coffee in Italy or wherever you're going to tell me about where you went the next time,
Right.
tastes sweeter from the lived and earned experience that you've gotten to get here. If you had a piece of advice, you've described this win of a big sort of life revelation and then becoming a better entrepreneur who now is going to do huge work with the clients that you have going forward, which you're already doing, but you'll do even more because of the focus that you brought to things. What's a piece of advice that you would give another entrepreneur, maybe who's looking for the type of win that you had?
If you're an entrepreneur who has been in business for over 10 years and you still feel like you own a job, you owe it to everyone in your life. Number one, yourself. Number two, your wife or your better half, whatever that is. And number three, everyone else, right? You owe it to yourself to stop, look around, and figure out how to reverse course. I don't care what it looks like. If you don't do it now, you'll never will. And you're going to sit on your deathbed going, what could have been if I would have just taken control of the thing that I actually wanted, right? If we look at entrepreneurialism, there's three things we're looking at that we want as an entrepreneur, right? We want financial independence. We want entrepreneurial freedom. Entrepreneurial freedom means that you get to go on those vacations and you don't work on those vacations. And then impact. Having the financial independence and the entrepreneurial freedom to then work on things, maybe it's philanthropic, maybe it's giving back to the industry, whatever that is, but having that impact. Because if you sit on your deathbed and you can't quantify the impact you left on this world, you're going to be the saddest person when you take your last breath.
Thank you. It is wonderful to hear your whole story. Thank you for summarizing that there in something that people can really take away and spark action from. That's fantastic. Michael, if people need to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can check me out on LinkedIn, Michael Buzinski. And then if they want to check out my book, The Rule of 26, which is 3 steps to doubling your revenue through your website, you go to ruleof26.com. And if you're just interested in what's going on in the Buzzworthy world, go to buzzworthy.biz. That ain't changing.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Know when to stop, strengthen your value proposition, and build profitability. That is how Michael Buzinski wins every day. Thank you, Buzz, for your buzzworthy win. Now, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our upcoming episodes, which include how to produce next-level results in your life and business with Wayne Lee, president of Wayne Lee Enterprises. And if you are a leader who really wants to learn how the Executive Wins coaching session can help you to grow your confidence and inspire your team, then visit executivewins.com to learn how. You can also subscribe to the Executive Wins monthly newsletter to stay up to date on the podcast, live events, education opportunities, and more. Visit executivewins.com/newsletter to sign up. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.